Pete and I could definitely, it says you can broadcast up to 8 hours before you start the broadcast, and Pete and I can talk for 8 hours. So, Pete, who are you?
I'm Pete. I post pictures and I like pictures. And yeah, I share my own photography on my own little photography Tumblr, which is, of course, twoom.tumblr.com, twoom.tumblr.com. And I happen to be one of the admins of Photos Worth Seeing, one of the many blogs that support original photography on Tumblr, like Lux Lit. Also is one of these wonderful blogs that do that even longer than Photos Worth Seeing does. Coconut chips, maple vanilla super snack. That's good. I envy you. And you, that is Fern, of course, Fernando, with his own photography blog, cubian-scholar.tumblr.com. And he is the admin of luxlit.net and also to be found at luxlit.tumblr.com. And he's eating super snacks.
All right, then. So,
What they say well, that's I'm with the metric system, so we say with 200 grams and more makes people not understand you. I rephrased that.
oh, really? Anyway, so just to let you all know, I made a mistake and I didn't start recording. So some of these pictures we've already been through. But we are going to keep going and go back to those pictures.
You're eating super snacks. I will eat gummy bears. So, German gummy bears, the best ones.
All right, so let's go to the next picture.
All right, the next one. Next one's please stand by. That's not the one. Oh, yes, that one. Which amazed me well, the picture is gorgeous, definitely. The one thing that amazed me after like 5 seconds, and I have to say, because we said that everything already, but Fern didn't press broadcast. So I had the pictures. This time I had it like 5 minutes before the actual streaming, so I was able to have a short glance. And what amazed me with that photo is when I realized that it's in the square crop, because I looked at that photo and suddenly I realized, oh wow, this is in a square crop, because usually photos in the square crop look kind of static. That's very often the case. I'm personally, and this is my personal opinion, this is not judgment or not saying this has to be that way or not to be that way. I personally don't like square crops because I'm not good with square crops. My square crop photos look all look boring, so meaning I have to work on them. And I was totally drawn into that photo. And as I said, I only had 5 minutes and I clicked through the photos, and that one I stayed on a bit longer, and I went through that, and it has this certain calmness to it, serenity to it, and on the other hand, it is so extremely dynamic with all these different lines that break the photo apart in different areas, and the crossing lines, the crossing directions in that. These fissure nets on the left, the one almost completely on the right, the boat that crosses the fissure lines in the background, the horizon line that is slightly over the middle part, but we have these 3 lines. There's so much going on in that photo, it has this tonality to it. It's almost a monochrome picture, so it absolutely blew me away. The slight texture that is applied to the photo. And then my eyes wandered around that photo. I don't know how long, and then I thought, "Oh damn, this is a square crop," and I wasn't really able to 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 uh, to get that. How is it possible to make a dynamic photo like that has this serenity, this calmness to it, and still keeping it that dynamic? And it has such a graphic feel to it, because of the lines, the flat background with the trees in the background, which almost looks like, how do you call that? It's also in Asian countries, these shadow, these silhouette thingies that are backlit, that have these two-dimensional silhouettes that are stacked, and therefore create depth. Fascinating photo. Fascinating photo.
No, I completely agree with everything you said. One of the things, again, that I like, because, you know, it's all about the complementary colors for me, is the slight green blueness of it, and the tension with the slight orangey, you know, the bluish and orangey that makes things pop. And then there's also the softness of the background, the you know, the softness and lack, unfocused and very abstract water, and then these very graphic, linear yet organic images. I mean, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous photograph. The square crop didn't bother me. It doesn't bother me necessarily. I understand what you're saying, though. I also do have to say, the one thing that keeps drawing, I keep going back to, is on the basket on the right. There is, at the top, right over where the netting is tied to the little pole on the left, there's some sort of string or something that repeats that curve of the hanging netting, not basket, the netting.
Yeah.
It just, but overall, it's what you said. I have nothing more to add. What you said. Period.
It's still, I can't stop looking at that photo. It's an amazing shot, and
Yeah.
the flatness of it. There's really like different layers stacked onto each other, like classic cell animation, hand-drawn animation, like on foils put together and stacked on each other, and create a depth without these. And it's also, it has a very deep depth of field, so everything is in focus, and still it has this enormous depth. Amazing photo. Definitely also one of the photos that I would love to frame and hang on my wall.
By the way, two things about, well, there's the photograph. I don't know if this was a filter that was added. I don't care. I think whatever this is, whether it's old film, whether it's a filter, the deftness, the artistic vision to create something like this is, I couldn't do it. Let's put it that. I mean, I don't have this kind of vision. Maybe I could learn, but I don't think I have it. I do want to tell you something. We have critiqued this person before.
Ah, okay.
And you know who this person is, by the way.
Okay. I'm now even more intrigued because I have no idea. I have no idea who that is. And I presume, but that doesn't, please don't misunderstand that. That doesn't take away anything. I have to say that I personally hate using filter plugins. I don't like it at all. I sometimes use them, especially since Google released the Nick effects for free, and there's this filter package, and I presume that this is Analog Effects Pro that is applied to that, because the texture, I think I remember that, but I would have never had the idea to use that on a photo like this. Amazing, amazing. And that's where we're at. When filters, when effects, however you might call that, are not used just for effect, but to add something to the photo, or no, not add something, to get something out of the photo that was already in there and emphasize that. And it's this almost monochrome feel to that. That is, of course, emphasized by a filter like that. And also the textures that, I don't know if there was mist in the photo already, but it seems to be like slightly foggy, and that adds a lot to the feel of the shot itself. And so it's like you said, I don't care at all. The only reason why I mention it is because I sit there and I'm just totally fascinated by that shot. And I have this theory about photos, and it's a very blunt claim. I have to say that. When I look at a photo, and the first thought I have is, how did they do that? Then I think the photographers failed, because then it's not about the photo itself anymore, but just about the technique. That shot is, I'm blown away. I look at the photo and I just think, wow. And then I start to analyze it, and then I ask myself, how did they do that? How did they achieve that? And not how did they achieve that photo, but how did they achieve the depth despite the graphicness, despite the seemingly flatness of the photo. So, and that's when things become really, really fascinating for me as someone who also creates pictures.
Yep. Right. Next.
Oh, I have to click myself. You start this time. I start.
Honestly, I like this photograph a lot. There's something about that playful, unexpected lime tone of light shining through that wave. And there's this gradient of color in the middle, and it's almost the rule of thirds thing with the waves right in the middle. There's just something, and then the birds that break everything up, and the slight curve from the middle right to the left that just sort of at an angle that one wave that has come in or is going out or whatever it is. There's just all this stuff happening, and it's a layering thing, but it's very light and airy. And I keep going back to that left side especially, and that horizontal blob of lime green light. I love the fact that the sun is obviously on the right, because there's more light on the right, and it's yeah. I don't quite know how to describe this photograph, and for me that's really bizarre. I'm just drawn into it in a magical, this is cool kind of way.
I absolutely agree about the lightness. It has a almost, and I mean that in a very positive way. It has almost some sort of a snapshot feel to it. It's you definitely see that there was someone who didn't just click the shutter. Absolutely. But it has this directness. There's nothing artificial in that photo. It's just give me a feeling of lightheartedness, of what you said, that airy feel to it. I have to say though that lime green it kind of distracts me, because that was the first thing that I saw. I clicked on the photo and I thought, what is that? So it distracted me. And after looking at it for a couple of seconds, I saw, okay, it's actually the water and obviously the sun shining through. But my first thought was, oh, something's wrong. Something is that some kind of artifact? Is there something wrong with the photo? And then I said, oh no, it's just the light. But that maybe that also makes the whole thing worth looking closer, because then I suddenly saw, okay, that almost that same tone of green is what we see in the right, in the back of the waves. So absolutely like that as well. And the birds, maybe it's the birds that create the snapshot feel, because they don't seem to in any way, and of course we usually can't really do that if we take landscape shots or nature shots. We cannot really stage something. What we can do is shift the camera and then change the angle, but they don't seem to be in any way placed. They're just there, and that's what I totally like at that photo. They're there, and so it kind of sucks you in and makes you feel like you're there as well. The only thing that I say, or I could imagine could work, is if this green that we see in the waves, if we could in any way emphasize on that on the upper right a bit more, so that this balances a bit more, because then it would look a bit more like as if that was done on purpose, if you know what I mean.
Yes, and I have to say the green on the left attracted me, and I had that what the, and then I'm looking, and then if you look at the almost perfectly horizontal line of that crest of the wave that green is in, there's other places where that green in lesser degrees and in lesser brightness and lesser area also shows up. So yes, it's that what? And then it's the
You're right. Perfect.
you know, and then again, it's that whole. I mean, it's almost really, when you look at this, it's almost a layer upon layer upon layer of horizontal, because even the clouds are very horizontal, but yet there's that breaking up in that green, and that just yeah, and I get what you mean about the snapshot, and I think this is what makes this even more delightful.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, it's just light and airy, and sometimes pretty is perfect. And
Yes.
this is pretty. It's beautifully pretty. It's like, oh my God, pretty. So yes, I agree.
I have to say one thing about snapshots. I mean, the term snapshot is so often used as a negative term. Oh, this is just a snapshot. A snapshot doesn't have to be something uh, bad or of lesser quality. A snapshot is just taken out of life. That is that moment, and without staging anything, and maybe even without wanting to make any kind of claim or something. This is just being there, not in any way artificial. It's just, hey, I want to capture this moment, and I don't want to add anything artsy or anything to transport a message of any kind. And it's perfect. I like that. Totally like that.
I agree with you. And one of the things also to keep in mind is that there are a lot of people, a lot of photographers, a lot of professional photographers who put in a lot of time and effort to make their photographs look imperfect and look snapshot like.
Right.
Because they want to capture that moment of lack of artifice. Whereas this, dude, who cares? Let's take the picture. It's pretty. Let's take the picture. Take the picture. Take the picture. I love this photograph. Yes. So anyway,
Let me just add one more thing.
really, you're gonna add one more thing? No, I'm surprised.
Please. It's I think that many people often use the word snapshot as an excuse, and don't do that. I mean, just a snapshot can be something gorgeous. It's just like, don't say, I mean, that's what makes this picture. The horizontal line is straight. There's obviously, I mean, we're talking so often about composition. It's something that we look through the viewfinder and adjust the camera and nudge it a bit to the left and the right and the angle stuff. It's something that comes with experience over time. You start to feel a photo, and there's no that sounds wrong probably, but I guess you know what I mean. There's no brain in it. It's feeling, and it doesn't have to be perfect by all means in terms of a technical standpoint, without wanting to say that this isn't perfect. I don't want to talk about perfection because that's not what this photo is about. It doesn't matter at all. It's just taking pictures a bit more consciously and not just snapping, and that can also be a snapshot and can be gorgeous.
Yep, totally agree. Next,
I'll click next. Yeah.
I'll let you go first.
Okay. I have I have to say that this is very, very, very even more subjective as what I'm very subjective in my photo critiques, but that is probably the most subjective thing I'll ever say or ever said. I hate photos taken with an on-camera flash, and that is most definitely taken with an on-camera flash. But that is just my personal aesthetics, because I hate these harsh shadows that are cast by that. That has a certain aesthetic, and I know a Tumblr, and I follow a certain Tumblr, and I won't mention the name. The person does that almost exclusively, taking photos with a strong on-camera flash, works with the shadows of that, works sometimes even, and that's what we have in these chairs, that the highlights almost blow out, or probably even blow out. And if you do that on purpose, which is definitely done here, that is on purpose. If it's not on purpose, then it's done in a way that it looks like as if it's on purpose, and that makes for me, it makes it interesting because I look closer. That is definitely not a photo that I would take. That is definitely not a photo that I would post. But this is definitely a photo that I would consider to reblog because it's a very interesting photo. The repeating patterns of the chairs. We have these dirty windows in the background that I totally like, the reflections, because of the on-camera flash that are reflecting towards the window. There's also some sort of monochrome feel to that. That pink in the chairs is very similar to the color of the window frame. It is, of course, goes more into a bluish thing, but it has a sort of a monochrome feel. The wall in the background is also that kind of color. The curtains are very similar. It's darker. The color outside of the window goes into more in a deeper bluish tone. So that fascinates me really a lot, even though I hate photos made with on-camera flash.
I do not dislike flash as much as you do. I think done properly, there's quite a few people who do it well. I think here it's done well. One of the things that captures, I agree with everything you said. I love the colors. There's the complementary color thing again. Excuse me, because it's the yellow gold and that purple pink. Fascinates me. One of the details that I just noticed as I was listening to you is in the window on the right pane. If you look into it, there's another window or something there.
Very
So
cool.
there's this depth to this image. The one thing that does bug me is on the right especially, but on the left a little bit as well. On the right, in the upper right on the edge, there's these scallops that look like apparently they might be like shadows from some sort of lighting or something that's on, you know what I mean? I don't know what that's called, but it's the lights that are maybe on the ceiling or something. And that distracts me a little. I didn't notice it until now that I actually really started looking at the photograph. Because I have to say, the photograph is such a visual that with those colors and that light, that really, that came while I was listening to you. And that's when I saw it. I did not see it when I chose this photograph. I love this. Yes, also a reblog, I have to say. Yeah.
Same what you said. The thing is, what distracts me with those things, but that is probably because I'm just a photo editing geek, and so it looks a bit like sloppily stamped out things. That's what I said. It looks a bit like as if there was something in there and that was sloppily cloned out or stamped out of the photo. I'm not
Could
sure.
be.
Doesn't really matter. It is distracting no matter what it is, and it also could be just that the wall's dirty or that there's a wallpaper on it that starts to peel off or something. And there's this. Is this my monitor? No, there's a little spot on the wall on the right that's also kind of distracting.
Yeah.
But it might be. And on the left there's a bright spot next to the window. But actually, it doesn't really matter. It's a cool picture. It's really a cool picture. That's what I'd call a cool picture, because it reminds me a bit of fish scales. These chairs, and yeah. Also, you have to see something like I don't see something like that. I could run across that 500 times, and I would never have the idea of that could make a cool picture, especially not with an on-camera flash, because I don't use it. And then making stuff like that, see, that is one of the reasons why I love doing these things, why I love working on PWS, because I see pictures and I am, in big quotes, forced to look at pictures that I usually would scroll over when they appear on my dash, or I wouldn't even realize that they're there. And now I look at that photo a bit more closely, and I discover things, and I say, oh wow, that is there, that exists. How do you see that? And that broadens the horizon, and that really invites to experiment more with my own photography. So very, very inspiring photo.
Totally agree. Next.
So next is the first
one. Oh, wait,
one.
that's it. So let's go to the first one.
Let's go to the first one. Yes. The one that we talked about for like half an hour and didn't record. So we'll make that.
So I'll start.
Please start.
I'll start now. Yes. So there's and this is something because I thought about this, but since you mentioned it, but I comment on this a lot in a lot of the images when I do.
we'll just act as if we haven't talked about that. We'll just
Right. All right. So there's the asymmetrical symmetry in this image throughout the photograph that is absolutely mesmerizing. It's hypnotizing. It just draws you in. Um, it's so well balanced, even though it's asymmetrical, and and there's the word that the tension between the asymmetry and the asymmetry, between the very sharp details in some areas and that incredible depth of field partially created by the very light fog. There's the balance of the trees on the left side that are balanced by the details of the ducks on the lower right side. There's the difference in lighting between the beam that goes up toward the left and the beam that goes toward the right. The beam on the left seems to be partially under light shade, and then you see how the yo no sé cómo se llaman esas cosas, but the bolts, there we go, the bolts are not quite as brightly detailed until they get towards the bottom of the curve where it goes into the right beam, and then on the right beam the bolts and the rust and everything is very, very detailed. There's the asymmetry of the handrail itself and the rails that are the vertical rails, but yet how that in itself folds in and creates some symmetry because of the shadow of the rails, up and down rails that are attached to that top handrail part. And then there's of course that bridge. That bridge. You keep going back to to that little bridge, and walking across it and having fun on either side and exploring. It's just, I mean, there's so many details, and yet everything is perfectly balanced.
absolutely. So you summed it up what we discovered in like half an hour. Perfect. Let me talk about the black and white in that one. It's also something I think that is a photo that works so perfectly in black and white, and I think and that it would be a shame to post that photo in color. Of course, take that with a pinch of salt, but um, this photo is about structures. It's about lines. It's about patterns. It's about depth. It's about details, and it's also in itself because the cross in the middle, the handrail, the river that guides us to the bridge itself, all these details that breaks that photo up in so many different parts that you can hardly see in that. I mean, in the most positive way, you can hardly see a landscape photo, but this is in itself an abstract photo, and the black and whiteness of that absolutely emphasizes that and lifts that up to onto an abstract level that is just simply gorgeous. And I said that or you said that we always get back to that bridge in the background because everything is directed to the bridge, but still we have that bridge as our optical center of the photo, and then we can from that point we can start to explore the photo, and we see details here, we see something, and I see it now the second time and I discover new things, and my eyes wander around the photo, but they still find the balance, and I find their calm point to always get back to that bridge in the background. It's an amazing shot, wonderful shot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, the more, and we've already looked at this photograph for like a half hour,
Yes.
but the more I keep looking at it, and there's so many details. Because one of the things too, when you really think about it, this is almost two photographs. This could easily be two separate photographs. That would be interesting, would be cool, but the juxtaposition of the sharpness in the foreground, and that eventual fading in the background, the light, the everything. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous photograph. The other thing I wanted to tell you was the other thing that fascinates me is that the X of the beams is almost repeated by the angle of the river and then the angle of the trees on the left moving up towards the upper left corner. So there's even that visual repetition, but yet again, it breaks the symmetry because on the right-hand side, that beam, no repetition.
Definitely. And all those, and that's what I see now. I haven't even realized that before. There's so many, if you look, there's so many triangles in that photo.
Yes.
Of course, these two big ones on the left and right created by the beams, but then we have the one they're divided by the river, so there are even two on the yeah, from the handrail, these lines that go down from the handrail, they also create kind of triangles with the beams of amazing photo, and the tension that we have between the nature background, and it's almost that these heavy steel beams kind of lock us out or keep us outside of the nature in the background. These heavy metal bars, these beams of metal kind of lock us out of the nature in the background. So there's this tension between man-made steel and yeah, nature, trees, bushes, the river, the birds. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful shot.
Okay, on that deep philosophical moment,
Next.
I'll let you start.
We'll just assume that we haven't talked about that. You're laughing. I was surprised. I have to say that. That was really, I love that shot. I absolutely love that shot. And that's, I said that before. This is also one of these photos. I look at that and I say, wow, how can you even get the idea to take a photo of something like that? So we have this almost monochrome photo, but the very apparent green, but the different tones of green in the legs. There are lots of detail in the stockings and the curves that create an almost three-dimensionality in that. The lines that lead up, the seams of the stockings that lead up the legs, the shadows created by the skirt on the legs that kind of divide the picture. We have on the lower side all this almost organic, very detailed part with the legs and the stockings, and on the upper side a very graphic, very punchy black and white, but also there's yet a little bit color in there that mirrors in the back on the wall. So there's this slightly orangish white, very warm white that is mirrored in the back. So I asked myself, how can you see something like that? It's an abstract picture. We have the movement of the legs that go up, that is repeated in the black curve on the skirt. Amazing photo. I said it before, that photo is definitely one I would never in my life take a photo like that, but I would definitely frame that and hang that on my wall because I'm totally fascinated by that, especially also with the composition. I mean, if we center I presume it was a woman, doesn't matter the person, that I think it wouldn't work at all, but that like slightly shifted to the left, we have the right leg almost in the middle. That also creates attention, especially with the shadow in the background. So we have so much going on that at first glance, seemingly so simple picture. Totally love that, and I would love to meet the photographer.
Uh, all right, so I totally agree with Pete. The one thing I will say also about this photograph is, and one of the things that I notice now is that the leg on the left, the outline, the edge of the leg on the left, and the edge of the shadow on the right wind up framing almost equidistant everything that's in between those two edges. I had not noticed that until now.
Noticed that until now. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Now, what the other thing, which and he said he would love to meet the photographer because, with like we said, we already talked about this. I surprised him and didn't tell him. I had to stop him because he was really. It's embarrassing to hear. I mean, yes, I love the photograph, but I took the photograph. I didn't tell him it was my photograph, and yeah, I accept the compliments he gave me. Yeah, and I do happen to love this photograph a lot, but I will also tell you it was a mannequin. It was at Macy's. I did tell you it was at Macy's, but it was a mannequin. And that black stuff, which I had already told you, is the Nike logo, and that is the word Nike on the mini dress. But yeah, I just walked by and saw this and went, damn. And this photograph is, I don't think it's even, I think this is not even balanced or anything, because sometimes I'll straighten stuff up. I think this is as shot, but with a lot of editing. I will also say a lot of editing. But I love it. I love the photograph. And I will also say one of the things that absolutely fascinates me about this photograph is that I was able to get that black and whiteness of the garment up on the top, so that it's that very striking, unknowable, because if I didn't tell you it was the Nike logo, you wouldn't know, I don't think. Yeah, I absolutely love this image. I did take it, but yes, and I thank you so very much for your compliments and for the fact that yes, I did just see it and went boom, that's it. So thank you. Next photo. Oh wait.
Yes. I presume it's not one of those photos that anyone would send in for the PWS Selfie Sunday, even though I think I see a reflection of the photographer in the glasses. No, I don't know. It's a bit it's tough to kind of recreate what I said the first time. My first reaction to that photo was that I almost laughed out loud, because I really think it's a funny photo, and maybe it's my twisted sense of humor, but it almost has this kind of Frankenstein feeling, or monster of Frankenstein feeling, because Frankenstein is the professor, not the monster, with that little hinge on the skull. And but I said that I think this is to an extent one of those photos that shows exactly what photography can be about, and that is leaving out essential detail to really make a clear statement. So what we see is a skull and a bit of the neck. I don't see if that's a bow tie or not. I just see there's a skull with glasses on, and the skull is standing, sitting, whatever. I don't know how it's if there was a skeleton attached or not, doesn't matter. But in the background we see some shelves, and I automatically assumed it's some kind of laboratory, because skull, for me, it automatically has some sort of a medical context. And so for me, what I saw in the background were like these tubes and flasks and bottles that are in any kind of laboratory. And we all know that scientists have a weird sense of humor, and when they have a skeleton standing around, then they maybe dress it up. And so for me, the setting was clear. This is kind of a laboratory or hospital or something. And that's something that I think is very, very fascinating. I said it, leaving out details and letting the audience, the viewer, make up their own story. So we just throw hints. And we often, as photographers or artists in general, we very often underestimate the viewer to be able to complete a picture. And when I think back at my screenwriting courses, one of the things my professor said, if you write a scene or anything, leave out detail, leave out more detail, cut out detail. And as soon as the scene doesn't work anymore, take the last bit in again, because the rest will happen inside the viewer's mind, will happen inside the reader's mind. So, and that makes things way more interesting. I think that picture, other than the fact that I think it's hilariously funny, is that we don't see exactly where it is, and we don't even. It is not important where exactly it is, because we complete the picture in our minds. And one last thing that I also said is, because you mentioned the eyes or the lack of eyeballs, that there's a difference between the left eye and the right eye. The eye on our left almost seemed as if there is something in there that is looking at us, while the right eye is completely empty. And that makes the picture, gives the picture sort of, at least for me, kind of an eerie feeling. So I feel a bit unsettled when I look at it a bit more closer. So first I laugh, and then I suddenly realize, okay, something is off. And but that's also something skulls always seem to grin, which is also something that is kind of creepy, to be very honest. And I should learn to breathe while talking.
Also, I mean, this was another surprise. This is another one of my images. Same trip to the same mall, taken the same night as the other photograph. And I just realized, looking at this image and thinking about the previous one, we had discussed in conversation about style. And one of the things that I lean towards heavily is often the very graphic, sharp, black and white contrast. And the other one in color, and this one in black and white, has that. So there is a style there. There's also even the sharpness of the bow tie itself, which actually,
bow tie.
you know, I keep looking at it and thinking it balances with the sharpness of the glasses and the teeth. It just creates that framing there. I also have to tell you, because I know we've talked about this before, when I was taking the photograph, I thought of a lot of what you said. It's going to look like a laboratory, blah, blah, blah. I pretty much, and I don't do this often, but I pretty much saw this image in my head. What I did not notice was the hinge. The hinge, I love the detail of the hinge, and I did not notice it until I had finished processing the photo. And then I went, oh my God, Frankenstein's monster.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. But thank you very much. This is one of my photos. Yes, this is another one of my photos. which I like. I really enjoyed this photograph, and you pretty much, in discussing this photograph, captured what I saw and hoped to capture. So thank you.
What I said as well was because you asked me whether I think if we look at both of your photographs, if there's something that kind of connects them style-wise. And what I realized is that you obviously like to take out details. So I think many people, or not many people, would have cut off the upper side of the skull. So really cutting in there. That's something I don't do that. When I rarely show them on Tumblr, and but when the last 2 years or so, I hardly ever took any. But there was a time when I took a lot of portraits, but I have a hard time cutting in or cutting of limbs or something. It's considered, well, it depends on how you do that. There are rules. Fuck rules. But some things just simply don't look good, and but that's might have to do. And I had a fascinating discussion with Algie lately about that, which made me really think, because I think my video background or film background, it's a completely different approach, because what we try is to keep things in frame all of the time, and we have to react, and so often, very often, the mediocre cameraman, the good ones, go close because they can operate their tools much better than we can as mediocre videographers. But we try to keep things safe, right? And we let things happen inside of the frame. Actually, that's what we're trained for. So this is the framing. Let things happen inside of the frame. Let people walk into the frame and walk out of the frame, and don't just move the camera all of the time, and don't go too close. So you have to be able to react, stuff like that. And so that is something that's kind of almost hardwired in me. So there we are, style again. I think that is one of the reasons why I very often rather take a step back and work comparatively wide angle, and to have rather an overview than really going into details. And so when I realized that, and I said, okay, there's something cool. I can work on that, and I can learn to go deeper into that. So
yeah. I'm going to tell you a story. I don't know if you've seen, and I've actually tried to watch it. It's a classic. I don't particularly like this film. It's Marilyn Monroe's Bus Stop. And there's a scene where she's lying on her side, and it's a tight close-up of her, and then Don Murray, I think it is, the actor who's the leading man, is behind her back here, and it's a very romantic scene, and it's a pivotal moment in the movie, and there was this whole issue of trying to frame it properly, and then at one point the director and the cameraman, or the director, the DP, the director of photography, are talking back and forth, and it's like, yeah, but you're cutting off the top of of Don Murray's head. And Marilyn Monroe said, the top, that's fine, because it's going to look great, because the top of his head has already been established. And you know what that means, the fact that we've already seen the top of his head before, so we know he's got one. And it goes back to that whole idea of the cropping, which actually the other photograph has too, when you think about it. The other thing, speaking of writing, Stephen King, in his fabulous book about writing, on writing, he talked about at one point the tendency to do all that describing like you were talking about. And so he writes a long passage with this description of this glass of wine and blah, 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 and the color and the flavor. And then he also writes just a couple of sentences. Bless you.
Tolkien.
I have never read it. I have no interest. So yeah. Really? Yeah. Again, now another reason not to read it. But then he says there's this glass of wine and it's blah, blah, blah. And he said the reader brings in their own story. And so yes, so there's those two things, and I hadn't thought about it until now that you were talking about this. Influence, quite obviously, the way I do this and the way I do my writing actually as well. So yes.
Yeah, story from my side. I mean, I write, or I wrote, and I started again a lot of short stories, and it's fascinating that I have kind of it was an ongoing series of stories that are loosely connected, very short ones, and I had a very specific idea what they meant, and for me it was totally clear what they meant, right? And someone, a very, very, very close person, one didn't read them, heard them, because I recorded them as well, and we talked about that whole thing, or the whole stories. And I can say that she took the whole, all of that completely differently, like almost the exact opposite, which was sort of an eye opener for me, in a way, to say, okay. And then I started to analyze my own stuff, and I realized that it's obviously a bit like your photography, that I emphasize on details and not about the whole picture. And so it's a bit like a map, right? You have a house here, a house there, and you come from that environment, and of course you imagine a forest between those houses, and the other person comes from another environment, and they think there are five other houses in between. So filling the empty space, and that's also something in photography, is of course the empty space is, of course, rather to emphasize on what is there, but giving the audience or the viewer the possibility to fill the picture with their own image, with their own feelings, with their own interpretation of your photos. That is it's a fascinating thing. It's a question whether you want that or not, but that can at least trigger a lot of very fascinating and sometimes highly emotional conversations.
Yes, and you don't want me to start crying, which y'all missed it because I wasn't recording, but he did make me start crying again. But you know, that goes back to John Berger, which we were talking about earlier, and the different ways of seeing. And then the bottom line is, whether you want them to bring their story in or not, they're always going to bring in their story. That's why this whole idea, to me, of a picture is worth 1,000 words, maybe, but then what words? You know, what story are you bringing to it? You know, if you're even if you're from the same culture, from the same family, at some point there's going to be different ways of seeing. So yes. So are we done?
Yeah, there's this what is these I think Oscar Wilde made this said this, that it's the spectator and not, what is it called? It's the spectator and not life that art really mirrors, and that's very true.
That is true.
And because you don't, if I look a picture, if I look a picture, you know, if I look at a picture, what I see is my life and not the life of the person who made it, or is my dirty fantasy, not the dirty fantasy.
All right, it's over. Dirty fantasies from Pete. No.
You don't want to hear them.
No.
Oh no.
All right, everybody. Bye.
Bye. If you want to hear them.